Ah, not muted. Hi, everyone. I'm Airier, and I definitely didn't just start watching the first 30 seconds of a video I was going to react to today before realizing that I had forgot to hit go live, and that definitely didn't happen. So now that definitely didn't happen, I can start on time exactly like we always planned, and nothing has happened that I ever need to defend myself against because it never happened. Professional streamer, everyone. Yeah. So not only are we checking out episode 44, the next part of the Light Flickers Part 1 from Star Wars Warhammer 40K, we're also going to be checking out On the Nature of the Imperium Man by Admiral Thrawn. This is something that was heavily recommended to watch at this point, and I definitely didn't delay part of the video today because I forgot until the last minute until someone reminded me and I added it in at the last second, on top of any other issues that definitely didn't happen. Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is the Scuff Stream, also known as Literally Everyone. If you're surprised about this, thank you for having so much unfounded confidence in me. I appreciate it, even though you're completely wrong. Yeah. Also, Hobbit, I saw the summons of 5 gifted memberships. Oh, God. Am I that bad normally? I really am that bad normally, aren't I? Yeah. So, if anyone has any comments about what I should or should not check out in the streams, let me know because I have the 2 videos set up. And if I shouldn't watch it, let me know as well because that's happened more than one time. In the meantime, I put out a bunch of polls for what kind of things I should 3D print and put up for sale. I have a few test prints for a giant spider, for the kobolds on a battle isopod. It looks like a freaking lobster. And then the winner, who won by a significant margin, was this juvenile young dragon sculpt. And frankly, it's really freaking cool, man. But people really want this one, so I'm going to put up a few more copies of it. Just need to print them out. This was the test copy. And yeah, they'll be out soon. Also, it's really freaking cool. I want one for myself. I might just print an extra one if I have the time. Yeah. More importantly, though, we're going to jump right in. And it looks like no one in the chat has said anything about me reacting to the absolutely wrong video. So that is definitely a good thing. Yeah. That's not like I've ever reacted to the wrong video. And then chat was the only reason I found out. In multiple streams in a row and at least for the last week every day. Yeah. Scuff. All the scuff. So we're going to jump right into this one. Again, this is On the Nature of the Imperium Man by Thrawn. It's on the Lord of Wargaming channel. And I'm just going to jump right in, see what happens, and find out how much this leads into it. This is Thrawn, so this is probably set in the future. I'm assuming because I don't know when he joined the Empire. I don't think he was in the Republic, but I also don't know much about it. We'll find out. Also, my nose is killing me today. That's like I'm allergic to cats, and I decide waking up with a cat on my face and cuddling, going, "Oh, you're fluffy," before realizing I'm awake now, and that's actually a cat, not just a dream. And having an allergy attack was a problem. Yep. Never foresaw that problem. Let's get started.
The following is a letter, recovered from a data slate formerly in possession of Sheev Palpatine, on the nature of the Imperium of Man.
Okay.
Addressed to Chancellor Sheev Palpatine, addressed by Admiral Thrawn.
Wait, Chancellor? Is this set before the Republic fell and became the Empire? Oh.
Salutations, Chancellor. I
Yeah?
apologize for the extended amount of time spent without further communication. The journey to Axom and my research into this new foe has taken...
Wait, is this also set in the Axom time period where they're doing the battle still? No, it's probably set in the future after the battle concluded. Although I was kind of assuming the planet would be dead by that point, considering, well, how it looks right here. Although I think this Canoness did manage to destroy it with holy flame, so that is a thing.
much longer than expected. This combined with my research into recovered artifacts, battlefield footage, and even the chance to talk to a few captured specimens has taken up much of my time these past few cycles.
They survived capture?
However, it is of my opinion that this
The tech
sacrifice
priest.
of time
Yeah.
has been well worth the cost, as I believe I now understand this Imperium far more than your recommended amount.
The annoying part about this is actually a cool bit of merch. I don't think GW sells it. So this is probably fan-made. I have no idea where to get it.
Of research time would have granted me. I will cut to the chase and explain what I have learned. First and foremost, the force we encounter now is a mere fraction of what is likely the totality of the Imperium of Man. Many recovered documents speak of these outsiders' home galaxy.
Fraction
and the
indeed.
one thing in common they all have is how they talk about the breadth and the scale of their domain. While some of the more outrageous estimates given by these documents could simply be written off as mere propaganda, in all likelihood the actual imperium of man is multiple magnitudes larger, both militarily and populationally.
Oh, he actually figured that out. The reason I'm actually a little surprised about that is because in-universe and out-of-universe, the tagline is, it's a empire of 1,000,000 worlds. That's wrong. It is not 1,000,000 worlds. It is substantially more than that. Because when you actually look at how many worlds are in this universe, or how much of this galaxy, the Milky Way specifically, has worlds, let's see if I can pull it up. Just going to pull it up quickly. How many planets in Milky Way? Let's see, a good one. This should be good. Pulling up, I mean, I could always just do good old-fashioned Wikipedia. Yeah. Barrow sky, solar system, naked eye, mass, type, number of stars, 400 billion. So yeah, between 100 and 400 billion stars. Now, not every planet would be around a star, but for planets that do form around stars, it's not going to be a single planet with a single star. I don't need to go into math, because I can't, to know that 1,000,000 worlds is so massively undercounting it that it would be the same as what Fan was doing for the Star Wars side numbers. It's complete bullshit. Most 40K fans do not realize that, because it's one of those propaganda lines you don't really think about, so they don't really pull attention to it. But the actual number of worlds they control, if they have a fraction of that, is probably so outside of 100 million or 1,000,000 or anything like that. Billions would probably be more accurate. Functionally, they can get one Space Marine per planet, and they would never run out, which is functionally how the system does actually work. Except they might get a couple from a planet, so they can be choosy. It's how their entire system works. I just love that he actually picked up on that when so many in real life people have never actually figured that out, because it's not highlighted. It's just really cool. I'm geeking out over this, but it's kind of cool to see a really smart character get something that most people don't.
While the numbers thrown around these documents for both military and civilian populations vary wildly, it is safe to estimate militarily the Imperium of Man in their home fields at least trillions of troops in total,
Easily.
and is home to an almost mind-breaking number of more citizens. In regard to the culture of these outsiders, the best way to describe them is paradoxical. They simultaneously are both advanced enough to field weapons that rival even those of the ancient Rakatans, but so religious and afraid of anything alien to their way of life that it makes even me wonder how they got to this point.
Oh, God.
Religiously,
I probably don't need to point out, but just saying that someone's too xenophobic, I'm not sure how they're going to be treated in the new Disney canon, but in the old EU version, the extended universe, yeah, they were entirely xenophobic and hid from everyone if they weren't explicitly being dicks about it. They weren't the bad guys all the time, but dear God, man, that is a completely accurate way to look at it.
the Imperials appear to worship a figure they know as the Emperor of Mankind. Worship of this figure appears to be mandatory, albeit with few exceptions, for a select few groups within the Imperium.
Mechanicus?
The core tenets of this religion are incredibly barbaric. The religion down to the core is inherently anti-intellectual, xenophobic, authoritarian, anti-technological development, and almost entirely uncaring.
Is the cult of the God Emperor anti-technological? I mean, I know for a fact the Martian cult, the Mechanicum, take your time period, are explicitly anti-technological. But I don't think that was nearly so much on the God Emperor side as opposed to the Omnissiah side. I mean, they're not big fans of it, but I don't think it was nearly as explicit there.
Their cult also makes up the backbone.
Although I should clarify, they're anti-thought, not anti-technology.
Of their entire society, only few being exempt from its eye of doom. While not a creator deity in the traditional sense, nor an ever-permanent yet unwilling entity such as the Force, the Emperor is treated as if he is both and neither by the followers of this creed.
And depending on the author you're reading, that may or may not be accurate. It does heavily change based on who's writing the Emperor. And even the common parlance does kind of change in how he's depicted, because right now they're looking at, yeah, he's becoming a god, and it's somehow different from the Psyker side. But we're not going to go into detail because we don't know it yet. There's been a few interviews with various authors, and that's the kind of, we're generally sticking to this, except for when we don't mentality. And if that sounds vague as fuck, yeah.
According to documents recovered from places of worship dedicated to this Emperor of Mankind on the Imperial-occupied Axom, the Emperor is closest to what we would call a savior god. Their myths tell of a period of time before the founding of their Imperium, one where the lost tribes of mankind stagnated and fell apart, until the Emperor of Mankind reunited these tribes and created the Imperium of Man. As for why this Emperor of Man hasn't been physically present, the myths explain that he was betrayed by a number of demons, only to be saved from death by what the Imperium calls the archangels and angels of his light.
Because that's how they refer to Space Marines. Oh. And Siren, you mentioned let the summoning begin. Oh, God. I will admit, it's kind of funny to hear someone who doesn't quite know the context think about this as explicitly myth. Is what I was going to say, and then I realized for the vast majority of people in the Warhammer universe, no. The way Thrawn's interpreting it as a foundational myth is an absolute truth that is also an absolute myth that they have no idea of the actual information on. So the way he's interpreting it is probably the way most scholars who don't know the actual information or haven't met a Primarch, which is probably the vast majority, would look at it that way. Hell, even just hearing about Guilliman coming back would be a matter of, whoa, God, son, back. Nice. And frankly, that might be more eloquent than the vast majority of people actually looking at it, if they would.
And placed on a device known as the Golden Throne, where he sits to this day. While there is much more to these myths, and I could spend much more time explaining them to you, I understand you will more than likely be completely disinterested in the minutiae of this cult, and simply wish to understand why I find it interesting. To put it simply, there is no way to untangle these myths from what little amount of their own history these outsiders seem to know.
Yeah. And this is one of those weird things where that is both accurate and inaccurate. Unlike most myths, which are mostly inaccurate and over a much shorter period of time. Frankly, the most unauthentic part about 40K is how little it's changed in 10,000 years. It's actually kind of ridiculous how close some of the early stories are. And that's just because if they change too much, like the Battletech timeline, it becomes unrecognizable way too fast.
For all intents and purposes, it appears this emperor was a real being and did really create a polity known as the Imperium of Man. As well as this, we unfortunately know from experience the angels this cult speaks of are in reality the Astartes some of our forces have fought against, few living to tell the tale. This religion also extends deeply into almost every military organization within their Imperium, some such as the Sisters of Battle, whom exist almost exclusively as the armed wing of their church. In addition, the religion naturally expands into the more front and center military aspects of the Imperium, such as their army whom they call the Imperial Guard. Within the Imperial Guard, worship of the Emperor is mandatory, and promotion of rank often corresponds with a degree of willingness to martyr oneself to their god. Surprisingly as well,
everything he just said amuses me because the way he phrased it is increased rank, more willing to martyr yourself. It's completely accurate up into a point, and he would probably not have access to the documents that would show that point being when you get high enough that his earlier exemptions came into play. He might be aware of it, but I'm not sure how far into that he would get. It's actually kind of really fun to see how they're portraying Thrawn and his intellectualism versus the explicit anti-intellectualism of the 40K side. It's just kind of fun to me because you were seeing where he's drawing conclusions that make sense, and some of them are right, but not for the way he seems to be saying it.
Well, this tends to also vary from regiment to regiment. Some, such as the Death Corps of Krieg, is far more extreme in their zealotry
Yeah.
and willingness to sacrifice oneself, while
Is it
others,
willingness
such
or
as the
desire at
Cadians,
that
taking
point?
a far more relaxed position in their faith in comparison. Their religion, as to be expected as well, serves as a form of cultural and legal enforcement. Any and all thought outside of the bounds of their church is penalized harshly,
Accurate.
and even the slightest degree of skepticism is met with execution or worse. Enforcement of these cultural and legal norms is usually administered through different channels.
And because he hasn't brought it up yet, he's talking about how they enforce it, not why. So is he working from the assumption that the Imperium of Man is doing this for control reasons, not for the actual legitimate reason of, if you don't, demons will more likely eat you than not? Which is not a huge percentage, but considering warp travel, not a 0%.
The civilian population is persecuted by a police force who they call the Arbiters. Low-level military personnel is
They are the
persecuted
law.
by their higher-ups, and high-level military personnel and even outsiders are
What
persecuted by what is possibly the most backward organization the Imperials have.
The most backward organization that he knows about. There's plenty more that are way worse. Oh, God. But yeah, I do personally love the Arbites. Not because I actually like them, but because they're explicitly just Judge Dredd ripoffs at a time period where that probably wasn't nearly as extreme. It was standard 80s fare, so yeah. It's not even a really big gulf. In fact, I'm pretty sure the reason they don't play too heavily is because there will be a lawsuit if Disney ever acquires Judge Dredd. Actually, for all I know, they already have. That might actually be a problem they have to deal with later. I just assume Disney owns most things at this point.
The Inquisition. The Inquisition can best be described as an intelligence group and the foremost powerful intelligence group within the Imperium. While I do not know everything about this organization, it appears it is made up of several orders which focus on policing different aspects and forms of heresy the larger Imperium
I guess intelligence
has
is
declared.
accurate.
Some focus on suppressing and detaining Force users. Others focus on eliminating aliens from the larger Imperium, while others still focus exclusively on ratting out so-called heretics. The power this Inquisition has over the Imperium is completely unrivaled. Even so much as a brief mention of their name strikes fear into even the highest-ranking military and administrative personnel. In effect, they are the ones who really run the Imperium due to the power their position affords.
Oh. I mean, up until Gilliman came back, I would actively agree with that. Functionally, they are the people running it, except for the High Lords, but they can work around the High Lords a lot easier. So it's debatable, but probably accurate. This is more my ignorance of the Indominus Crusade stuff going forward. I don't know how much Gilliman has changed that paradigm. That standard way of working up. I know he changed things. I thought he was still working with the Inquisition, even if he was a little unwilling about it. So I'm not entirely sure how much power they gained and or lost, if any, under him. And I'm not even sure if we're working with a version of Thrawn who would have access to that material, even though they're coming from a time period where they were part or aware of that crusade. I'm thinking way too much into this, but frankly, it's well written, so I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt that it's probably considered.
Not even the so-called High Lords who head the bureaucracy of the Imperium can hold them to heel. On the note of how Imperial bureaucracy functions, it is of great importance we also address one of the few seeming exceptions to both Imperial religion and Imperial bureaucracy.
Keep saying a few.
This
What are the
group,
others?
from what I have gathered, roughly translates to the Mechanicus, or
Accurate.
the Adeptus Mechanicus. This group, as stated, seemingly exists outside of the larger imperial polity entirely, almost as if it were an ally rather than an actual component of the Imperium. However, that would be a mistake to assume. The Mechanicus may...
Oh, he picked up on that. Sorry, the reason I'm actually highlighting that is because he's right. It's something that most of the 40K timeline, and I do mean most of the people in the timeline and the people playing it, forget. Technically, the Mechanicus is still an ally of the Imperium. They are a significant part of it, but they are their own thing. It's kind of funny that that's something that most people in 40K, both in lore and in player bases, do not remember. It's not hidden, it's just never really highlighted. Because functionally at this point, it does not matter. Unless they pull some random bullshit to really start playing around with the Dark Mechanicum and side switching up, because why not? Do I think GW is going to do that? I mean, maybe in like 40 years when they need a new plot line and they decide to blow shit up again, because that would be a big check, bigger than Cadia dying. But I don't entirely think that's likely. So while technically what he's saying is accurate, functionally the reason most people don't know about it is because it does not matter and hasn't for literal in real life decades.
May have at one point been a mere ally rather than a component of the Imperial machine.
And even then that hasn't
but
changed.
Much like a symbiotic organism, it appears to have bonded to the Imperium so fully that both the Imperium itself and the Mechanicus depend on each other for their mutual self-interest.
To some
the
extent.
Mechanicus, as the name suggests, deals with the maintenance and production
more
of
on Mars than
Imperial
anything.
technology. As stated before, the Imperium by and large is paradoxically anti-technological development, fearing any sort of technological progress and even unauthorized maintenance of existing technology. This, of course, creates a massive issue for a technologically advanced and spacefaring polity, as common sense would tell you.
I'm still going to disagree with him slightly in this piece. I get where he's coming from. It very much seems like the Mechanicum line of "do not fuck with our shit," heavily paraphrased, of course, is giving him the impression that the Imperium is anti-technology. These guys, very much anti-technology they don't control, and or claim that they learned the Omnissiah already made when they're just stealing something from an alien. They would never admit to that, but it has happened. Depending on how radical the Magos is, it's somewhat debatable. And then you get to Call, and, well, it's Call, so yeah, that doesn't count for shit. But yeah, it does seem like he's giving the general aversion of technology as opposed to a general aversion of thought. I don't think it's a problem with people performing the maintenance as having enough self-determination and enough free thought and free time to think to do it in the first place. The outcome is the same, but I think the reason is slightly different. Now, I'm wondering, is this a writing issue where they're just hyper-summarizing, or they're looking at specifically how someone from Thrawn's perspective with incomplete information would work? And with how much information he's playing from, I think he's closer to working with incomplete information, but drawing really good sources from it. This is actually really fun as a writing major thing because it's multiple layers of understanding. There's the base level of what most people know. So the stuff we could just find by wiki walking and finding out all the specific information. There's the level of the characters who would have no action would know, which would be just the general grunt, and file. Yeah, I've heard it referred to that way. I don't know why that way multiple times, but yeah. And then there's a level Thrawn be working at where he's pulling a lot from what people know to show that he's a little more aware of what's going on than the standard file trooper would know. And we're seeing how that's playing in to give an idea of what information he's pulling from. So what he's talking about is also a really good way to show what the author is highlighting as his understanding. It's just really complicated because when you try to keep all this straight, you either have an amazing memory, or what most people do is you actually have a lore Bible of what this character should know, what he should be able to infer, and what information he explicitly cannot know. If that sounds like a lot, yeah, it is. There's a reason a lot of people do not do that and just take plot holes instead.
The Mechanicus appear to be the answer to that problem, being one of, if not the only, organization allowed in the Imperium to maintain and produce technology of all kinds. Everything we see the Imperials use is manufactured and maintained by the Mechanicus, or at times few of their authorized exceptions. However, this does not mean the Mechanicus is without issues of their own in this regard. The Mechanicus, much like the rest of the Imperium, is highly religious, albeit worshipping a far different god than the rest of the Imperium. While I could go into extreme depth into the nature of Mechanicus's religion and culture, it would be best if I were as concise as possible. The Mechanicus appear to worship a being they call the Omniscia, or the machine god. And importantly for the understanding of the Imperium as a whole, this god's teachings explicitly disallow invention. This is due to Mechanicus' belief that all wholly sanctioned technology has already been invented by mankind in the past, and to invent anything new would be an affront to the holy machines that already exist.
Not so much a comment on this, but what he's saying here, Thrawn is definitely coming from the perspective of this is stupid. And most players, myself included, come from the perspective of this is intentionally stupid. But some of the lore, especially recently, is hedging towards two different points. The first one being with how machine spirits work, with how the psychic aspect is playing in with technology. That might legitimately be a concern of an actual god they may or may not be aware of. It may or may not be the Void Dragon or a majority of the Void Dragon sealed down below. Or if the Void Dragon was converted into a deity, which in its own route is all kinds of, that is actually probably more dangerous than a lot of the other shit out there, because that would be a physical god giving psychic power through the Immaterium on top of that. So, there's problems with that. And the other one being, considering the heights of technology, the golden age of, I was going to say Imperium, of mankind reached, there is a very real chance that they're accurate, that all technology has been discovered already. They're just making inferior prototypes. When they discover something, they're just making what their AIs in their various ships and other, possibly guns, possibly vehicles would be aware of already. How big an AI needs it, I don't know. But the Arch Mechanicus, which have been shown in stories to explicitly contain pre-built AIs that they make in there without realizing they're making AIs, understand, know of, and hate because of how stupid they're implementing it. It's only been a few short stories, but it's a thing. Also, the AI is explicitly an STC at the heart of every Heart Mechanicus, so the thing they're always searching for is literally something they still build and don't even realize they still build it. Yeah, that's fun, isn't it?
This, as you can reason yourself, is a fact that may very well give us the upper hand against the Imperium. With their own self-imposed restrictions, we may have an opening against them and be able to adapt where they can't, if need be. Finally,
Maybe.
On the note of the Astartes
They
and
do
the
have good
other
shit, though.
super soldier units we have encountered both on Axom and from rumors outside of the system, it is much intriguing to me how little power these military assets hold within the larger Imperium.
Explicitly, yeah.
The Astartes appear to be organized into largely autonomous groups known as chapters.
Broken up into small
They also
units
tend
and
to answer
intentionally
very
depowered
little, only
politically.
taking orders from the administrative state and at times the Inquisition. Despite the autonomy, however, very few of these chapters seem to wield any real power over the larger imperial polity.
With the exception of Blue Team, who he will be facing, so yeah.
Many simply governing themselves as opposed to interfering with who they regard as their lessers. As well as this, the population of Astartes is incredibly small, seemingly on purpose for a, as of yet, unknown reason. The maximum number of Astartes...
So he read the mythology and understood it as demons, but he didn't figure out that the mythology is covering up the Horus Heresy, so he was working on that incorrect information. Okay. That's actually really cool because it does show where his information is lacking and what wrong conclusions he's coming from there. I'm not really sure it changes his assessment, but it is kind of cool to see what he would be missing.
Astartes allowed per chapter seems to be around 1,000, and many still do not
Depending on
keep
who you're
even
talking
remotely close to that number. This intrigues me greatly, seeing as how efficient these space marines are on the field of battle. Like a vestigial claw, the Astartes, by all accounts, appear to have once been the backbone of the Imperial military due to their effectiveness on the battlefield and their nature as written in the few historical accounts we do have. This makes me wonder greatly why...
Oh, it sounds like he did actually get the historical accounts, but because it was dealing with demons, he wrote them off as only mythology and not mythology covering... Because 10,000 years is still a long period of time. Although, I mean, the Republic's been a long time group as well, so it should work.
They have been so seemingly and purposely decreased in size so drastically. Perhaps supply issues? A rebellion of sorts? This is something I greatly wish to research further.
I mean,
enough of my music.
The first one is actually incredibly accurate depending on which chapter. The second one is the big reason in universe, though. Also, Custody is nice.
However, as there is one final possible faction of super soldiers the Imperium may very well possess. I would like to note that our only information regarding what I will discuss next comes from the accounts of captured prisoners of war, mostly high-ranking personnel, and because of that should be regarded with a grain of salt. However, due to the number of times this group has come up, and due to the secretive and totalitarian nature of the Imperium as a whole, I feel it is needed that the possible existence of this group be entertained.
Dude.
This final group has been called many names by those our forces have interrogated. The Gold...
As someone who does favor the Custodians as his main army because putting guy in cover and saying, fuck you, I'm going to survive this shit is hilariously fun, the usual thing I've heard refer to them as is, oh god, those fucking golden boys. Or the goddamn bananas. Either way, I'm fun with it.
Golden Warriors, the Guardians of the Emperor, the Imperial Guardians, and finally their most common name, the Custodes. As I said, little is known about this group, and even the little we do know is conjecture and the words we have tortured out of Imperial commanders, but what they have told us is disturbing, to put mildly. The Custodes appear to be the personal guardians of the Emperor of Man.
The AI voicing of Custodes. That just bugs me. There's a lot of different ways you can pronounce things. That's not the one I would choose.
Kind back in their home galaxy, and are quite possibly the most dangerous warriors the Imperium of Man can field.
That are an army, not
specific units. It is said
units.
that a single space marine is worth 100 men, an estimate I can personally attest to, seeing how many of our clone forces are needed to take down only one Astarte. Then it is said that a single Custode is worth 100 space marines. It is unknown currently how many, if any at all, Custodes are fielded within the Imperial force that has found their way to our doorstep.
At least one.
However, even one of these beings poses a threat so massive to our military assets that I don't even know if we have anything that would be able to counter them.
A Jedi,
however,
specifically
this may very well
one
all be
Jedi.
Nearly completely pointless. In all reality, the Imperium of Man may not be the biggest threat on our doorstep, and our war against this enemy may very well be nothing more than a waste of time. And I think you may understand this as well, Chancellor.
What?
In order to understand what I am about to say, I must explain briefly and simplistically one of the most important theories ever devised on the nature of civilizations and cosmic society. This theory, of course, is the general theory of cosmic sociology. Devised around 40 years ago by quasi-sociologist and researcher Jules Louis.
Is he really leading into what I think he's leading into?
This theory, in a basic sense, posits that all civilizations, from the lowest hunter-gatherer societies to the largest and most complex spacefaring polities, can be categorized into three main categories: prey, predator, and parasite. Societies may change category over time. For example, a predator society through stagnation and collapse may become a prey society, much like an animal may evolve and become weaker after environmental pressures are lifted. But all societies always fall into one of these categories. In order for a society to fall into one of these categories, it must first meet certain types of criteria. The exact number of criteria met is not important, only that one society meets one set of criteria more than the other. And the category with the most criteria met is what category this given society falls into.
This is an incredibly reductive theory, not where I thought he was going. But I think I know where he's leading on this one, that they're fighting not because they're a predator society, but because they're a prey society fighting back. I just think his general principle here, I'm not sure if this is drawn from an actual book or an in-universe thing or something you just created for this piece. It sounds like something someone would come up with, but it's also just so incredibly reductive to have only the three ways to verify how a society would react. There's a lot of ways they would interpret this right now in human philosophy classes, and they usually have a few more aspects of imbalance and sometimes, well, explicitly death-seeking, but those are more additional ones that do exist, but they're different.
To explain further, here is a list of but a few criteria for each given category. Predator society criteria. Fast to act. Propagation of society is built primarily on the conquest of other societies. Military and diplomatic action is primarily done in an offensive manner. First to initiate conflict. constantly looking to expand society's given territory. Culture is built primarily on the expansion of the military of the given society. Contains one massive or multiple smaller programs of colonization and subjugation of rival societies. Resource extraction is built primarily on the theft or conquest of rival societies.
Close to what
Prey
the Imperium
society
does.
criteria. Slow to act. Propagation of society is built primarily on the survival of gained territory rather than conquest.
Which would also be Alexander the Great after he failed in India and then was pushed back and then later died. His empire collapsed in on itself when they were trying to save it, but failed.
Military and diplomatic action is primarily done in a defensive manner, last to initiate conflict unless territory is disturbed.
Also a description of how the Imperium does act.
Hesitant to expand territory, typically but not always a former predator society who have stagnated. Culture is built primarily on the avoidance of conflict. Culture is built...
That part doesn't fit with the Imperium, but the stagnated does. Again, they're so incredibly reductive, the terms he's using.
Primarily on the defense of the given society. Parasite society criteria. Slow to act when idle, fast to act when disturbed. Propagation of society is built primarily on a relationship with a larger society. Military and diplomatic action is primarily done sparingly and on a much smaller scale, unable to initiate large-scale conflict, possesses very little if no territory at all.
Oh, he's basically describing a pirate commune at that point.
Typically, but not always, the remnants of a former predator or prey society who have been nearly annihilated by a conflict. Culture is built primarily on the avoidance of notice by larger societies.
Which would be an accurate way to describe the Imperium prior to the Great Crusade.
Culture is
when it was
built
literally
primarily
just on
on
Earth.
beneficial relationships with larger societies.
Minus that part.
For some examples of each society, look no further than the galaxy we live in today. For example, the Republic is an almost perfect example of a prey society. The Republic prior to the onset of the Clone Wars was incredibly slow to act. The culture was built on the avoidance of conflict at any cost. And even when the war began, it was the last to initiate conflict, and its main goal was to protect territory gained in thousands of years past. The Separatists, on the other hand, is a rather straightforward example of a predator society. They were the first to initiate this war.
I just realized he's telling Palpatine in this about the sides of the pawns he's both using. There we go. So it's like, oh yes, here are the two completely unique societies that are in no way, shape, or form controlled. And Palpatine's just going like, I see. Yes, these are definitely societies who have done this all on their own. Although he probably would agree with the Republic being prey, but it's all just pawn pieces to Palpatine. That's who he's telling to. This is literally going up to Ozzy Osbourne and asking what he thinks about AC/DC's music while saying that Black Sabbath was an okay band, but they never really looked into them much. It's like, okay, sure. Fine. You have no idea who you're talking to. It's just kind of funny to me that way.
And first to expand territory. And their entire society is built on the attempt to exert themselves as a polity through violence and conquest. For a parasite society, look no further than the varied amounts of criminal societies that scatter the outer rim. From the Mandalorians to the Hutts to the Pikes, all these societies exist as shadows of their former selves, remnants of societies that were annihilated by the
Do the Hutts count as being an annihilated society? Because I wasn't sure they've ever actually gone far enough to do that. These kind of just keep going.
Republic's early conquests. They possess very little territory, and they only act to gain the favor of other, larger societies in order to ensure their survival. Now that I have explained the basics of this theory, it is finally time I explain the reason behind my conclusion. To put it simply, from all the research I have done, it appears the Imperium of Man, rather than a predator society, is in fact a prey society. Out of the criteria of a predator society, the Imperium of Man meets two, arguably three criteria. Out of the prey society criteria, the Imperium meets five. The Imperium, like an invasive species to a much tamer environment, appears to only be a predator to us. Like a rancor put anywhere other than their home, it reigns in most conflicts it is engaged in. But back in its home, back in its natural environment, it is but prey fighting off predators of unimaginable cruelty. The Imperium may only be the way it is simply due to the fact that it has to be in order to survive.
And he has come to the heart of it through means I think are kind of reductive, but he has come to the basic correct conclusion. They are as they are because there are things trying to kill them that are so much worse. And the irony being he was explicitly told what those things were and thought it was mythology and dismissed it.
The predators it may face may well be so inhuman and so dangerous that they may very well have made the Imperium in the form we fight against now. However, like all invasive species, the existence of the Imperium in our galaxy is attracting its natural predators slowly but surely.
Oh.
It is my opinion we may have already seen glimpses of these predators in the war of Axom itself. Rumors of horrors so foreign and utterly alien to our galaxy that they may very well be just glimpses of the predators the Imperium has faced in their...
The irony being he thinks that the Imperium drew those guys, where in reality it's a mix of both, because they came with the Imperium, but they were hiding from those guys, specifically the Gene Stealers. The demons, I don't really know which way Fan's going on that one, because I'm not sure if he's pulling some of the warp from the 40K side to influence the Star Wars side, or if he's finding some of the really fucked up shit that is very heavily buried in Star Wars lore for the warp. Sorry, the Force and hyperspace.
Natural habitat. Rumors of our forces going mad and mutating into barbaric beasts. Alien creatures armed in biologically created armor and weapons, and even sentient beings of the Force itself so malicious they taint the very land they stand upon have run wild since our arrival. And I fear those rumors are only the beginning of the horror we will face. Like two male Lothian deer fighting over who the forest belongs to, we do not notice the wolves in the bushes all around us. And if we continue to waste our energy on this fight, we will stand no chance against the hungry predators on our doorstep.
But that's if they do come.
I hope you take my words into consideration, Chancellor. I do not know what to do now.
Palpatine listening to people. That's funny.
But I do know the gravity of what we face. Thank you for your time. Regards, Admiral Thrawn. My words into...
Dude. So yeah, I love how this is going in. I'm not sure if Fan made that canon or not, but I love how he's getting in there and drawing the conclusion of they're horrible, but it doesn't look like they're trying to expand. So what are they fighting against? Oh shit, they're fighting against something. We should probably be ready. It's such a great conclusion because it's correct. But I don't know if Fan is heading that way or not. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That said, I got time. We're going to jump into the next part, which is going to be Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K, Episode 44, The Light Flickers, Part 1. We're only going to check out this one part today, but I want to do it, so we're going to do it. It's a good enough reason for me, and I'm sticking to it. Also because everything about this so far is really freaking cool. And I loved getting Thrawn's angle here. And people have said in the chat that Thrawn being reductive is actually very close to his canon way to approach characters. So, sure. I never read the Thrawn books, so I never got so far into his lore. And I mean that either for the EU, the extended universe, or the Disney versions. I haven't checked out any of the Disney TV shows. I want to check out The Mandalorian. I heard it's good. Then I'll probably check out Ahsoka because Balin looked awesome, and I just kind of want to see that more. Beyond that, I don't really know. So yeah, we'll see what happens. In the meantime, we're going to see what happens here. And I can do that now for a lot cheaper price. Let's do it. That is a unique style of font.
The Grand Basilica, once a sanctuary of hope and faith, now stood as a solemn monument to the impending pale doom which surrounded the Imperium on Axom. Within its hallowed walls, a gathering of desperate soldiers clung to fast-fading threads of faith, hands reaching out for answers and the hope they sought to find within those answers. The sisters, resolute as ever, suffered no indignity of doubt. But they were far from the only ones present. Saint Lazarus, newly appointed and burdened with duty and doubts great enough to shatter a soul, stood before them, his heart heavy beneath his resolute spirit. He had faced battle and death, but this moment, this choice, tested his newfound mantle of leadership. A mantle he feared he would soon be surrendering into the frigid maw of the afterlife. Clad in humble sackcloth adorned with flak armor, Lazarus bore the scars of war openly.
So if I'm remembering right, this is right after the chapter master of the Definitely Not Iron Hands walked out and admittedly tore people to shreds, physically, literally, and probably emotionally too, with the one Jedi who got thrown away, but seemed to have survived the confrontation, which is more than I expected. Why is he afraid of... I don't think he's aware of the virus bomb at this point. Why would he be afraid of dying? Also, Ripoff Productions. The Hutts used to be a warrior culture, ruled most of the galaxy. Picture a buff, swole Hutt, tons of pure muscle, now imagine an army. Seriously? I have a hard time believing Hutts would organize and not fuck around. Like, their entire thing is literally smart enough to get where they are, but gluttonous enough to never take advantage of it.
Already, he had lost an arm and a leg to this battle, both limbs claimed by merciless violence, replaced now with finely made mechanical prosthetics. They served as constant reminders of his questionable mortality, of the fragility of flesh, both his own and that of all of those who looked up towards him as he took his place at the elevated pulpit. Yet he wore them with a fierce determination, for he knew that the essence of a saint lay not in a physical body, but within the indomitable spirit that blazed inside. And the mob of men and women before him did not deserve anything less than a saint. Not a man mired in doubts, not a fool elevated by circumstance to where he should not have served, not a coward weighed down by uncertainty and fear. The news he now sought to deliver demanded a saint, and so a saint he would be.
How much information
he held
does
the
he
turmoil
have right
that
now?
churned within his chest and stomach tight through the twin vices of discipline and the truest sense of duty. Taking a deep breath, Lazarus began. My brothers and sisters, soldiers of the Imperium, I stand before you today, a vessel of the God Emperor's will and his ineffable plan. This world faces an imminent threat, one that demands a terrible sacrifice. The evacuation efforts we have labored...
Okay, so if they're talking about evacuations, then yeah, this is after he's already been briefed on the virus bomb. Okay. So we have had that happen in the background. That explains a lot more why he's worried. Okay.
to organize have been cut short by the looming specter of annihilation. He announced loudly, his words bringing silence to all those assembled. Beside him stood two figures. Canoness Commander Leandra Ordain, her presence a pillar of unwavering faith, and First Captain Heldris Torv of the Tempered Hands Space Marine Chapter. A symbol of resolute power, both representatives of the faith, scions of victory. Lazarus drew strength from their support as he gazed upon the varied forces of the Imperium gathered before him. Sisters of Battle, Imperial Guardsmen, and support staff from all walks of life awaited his words. Most looked up at him, their gazes filled with desperate hope. Hope he was not able to deliver. A ripple of apprehension spread through the Basilica as his pronouncement began.
So working under the idea that he's not aware that the canoness did succeed, he's probably evacuating them, and they'll have to find out that she succeeded based on no one dying to a virus bomb. Makes sense to act as if she hasn't, though. I wonder how that'll play into what's about to happen.
But Lazarus pressed on.
Because it seems like he's acting as if she's failed.
Around the hideous burns he had received when the replicate had ambushed him. I stand here not to dictate your fate, but to offer you a choice. As I am sure you have all heard by now, it is true that the final salvation within the Basilica has been prematurely unleashed.
Yes, I hear there's quite a problem with people in basilicas prematurely unleashing. Usually it's Catholic ones, though, but we're not going to go into that on any detail. If you don't understand it, do not look it up in a public computer.
600 valiant souls must remain behind. Their duty to face the calamity that awaits us.
Only 600?
In the face of an unleashed virus bomb, death will be certain, and the sacrifice absolute. Oof. Should the virus bomb fail to activate, the forces of the Galactic Republic will descend upon us. Their overwhelming numbers and witch knights, an imminent threat, and one that 600 of us will be unable to overcome.
So he is taking into account that the bomb might be defused and saying you're either given a suicide mission of imminent death or most likely imminent death. I guess it really comes down to, is Windu in control of the Star Wars forces by the end? Hell, it might actually be safer if Palpatine takes over because he's still playing the part of the wise chancellor at this point. Also, I don't know why my accent went southern there. Yeah. Granted, he's also not supposed to be on this planet. It's probably heavily hidden, so I don't think he would do that. So if anything, it would probably devolve to Anakin. Actually, that would be hilarious if it turned out Anakin took prisoners with Kaon at his side, because there's going to be a bunch of people who know just enough to realize what the fuck they're looking at, and that is probably hoping they would be shot instead. Oh, God.
The room fell into a heavy silence, each soldier grappling with the enormity of the decision thrust upon them. Lazarus continued speaking through it all, for he knew he could not, no, would not, ask of others what he himself would not do. And so, with ice like steel flowing through his veins, the new saint held nothing back. I will stand with you, shoulder to shoulder, among the 600 who remain. It is a burden I do not ask lightly, for I too am prepared to return to the Emperor's side once more before I abandon any to fight alone. Together, we shall become either an unbreakable shield or a bloody testament to the unwavering loyalty that burns within the heart of humanity. This is the Emperor's home, and I shall not allow the Republic to desecrate it with impunity. As Lazarus finished speaking, his gaze traveled across the faces of those assembled, seeking volunteers, the truest and bravest among them. His heart ached with the knowledge that many lives would be altered by his choice, that loved ones would be left behind. But amidst the uncertainty he beheld, he also saw flickers of determination ignite within the eyes of his soldiers, and those scant flames lent heat to his own. Gritting a mouth full of true and false teeth, the Imperial Saint nodded his head. Step forth, honored brethren, and let your courage shine!
It's a bit of a joke at this point, but I'm kind of wondering if too many people will step forward. Because the Saint just said, I will stand with you and fight to the end. That is, for anyone who isn't just paying lip service to their religion inside the church itself after all of this, that is a big motivating factor, and considering everyone who probably was in that category is long gone, or not there, yeah. I think the bigger problem will be getting people not to stay with him.
Do not heed the call out of blind devotion, but out of the conviction born of your own will. Together we shall defy the darkness and ignite a beacon of hope, a flame that will guide future generations in the face of the adversary. Rally your spite, harness your rage, kindle your faith. If death faces us today, then let us face it as true scions of humanity. If we must die, then let us all die standing! He yelled into the echoing spaces of the filled basilica. Before him was an ocean of varied soldiers, from Calambians, Vastellans, and Ogrins, to Sisters of Battle, Tempestus Scions, and the largely wounded Cadians and Kriegers. Even the remaining stormtroopers who had been under Shadrick's command were among them.
Oh!
Stripped of their...
Wait, seriously? I was not expecting them to even be considered here. I thought they'd literally just be locked up or chained to the front as extra damage reduction, i.e. they might stop a piece of dirt from hitting the cathedral. The bullets are too good for them.
weapons and standing at ease only paces away from those who had fought against them. These men puzzled Lazarus, as it was they who had helped launch the bomb that would end the world. And
because
yet
they're mentally
they
broken,
seemed all too happy to take his orders once they had heard of Commissar Shadrick's apparent success. In spite of their role in the crisis they all now faced, they were among the first to step forward, the first to volunteer their lives. Among the first, but not the only ones, not by far. Over 600 loyal soldiers of the Imperium stepped forward, as well as a hefty number of the support staff, and Lazarus smiled down at them, a grim but proud expression he did not try to hide.
Would the support staff be in any way helpful at this point? What actually counts as support staff within the Imperium anyways? I guess hospitalers, so probably something like that.
Now he would only have to choose whom to spare from this sacrifice, as opposed to whom he would need to offer up to it. Leandra stepped forward, raising her newly acquired hand flamer, and issuing a blast of fire into the air over their heads.
I'm pretty sure he's not going to want her there, but also I don't think he has a choice in this matter.
For Emperor and Imperium! She cried out, and the faithful answered her. For Emperor and Imperium! For Emperor and Imperium! For Emperor and Imperium!
Wait, fan? Are we already at the halftime? What the hell? I guess 10 minutes in, it's not bad. Unless there's something he forgot.
Hey there, fellow fans. Fan with too much time
Still love
here.
his background.
Hoping that you were enjoying this episode of Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K, The Light Flickers, Part 1. Please forgive the interlude here in the middle of the episode.
My God, can you imagine fan putting in an interlude in an episode? Truly, this has never happened before. It is so unheard of. I do not know how to understand this happening. Okay, fake rage over. Seriously. Am I the one who's just looking at this going, that is a really cool room? I'm having room envy. Yeah, just throwing that out there.
But I am compelled to remind everybody about my current project, the project on which a lot of my creative future may very well hinge. I have recently released the Kickstarter for my latest comic book project, Song and Stone, and currently I'm about halfway through my Kickstarter run, but regretfully, I've only made about a little under $900 with 16 backers.
Damn.
There are a lot more than 16 viewers on this video, and I am asking, though I'm not asking for much, if you could find it in you to donate even $1 to my Kickstarter, if even a quarter of the people watching this would do that for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't already, I'm not sure if it's still active,
my professional life as well as with this fan fiction. I hate to
wait, according to Brandon, the Kickstarter funding goal was made one day after he uploaded this video. Actually, I'm just going to quickly double check that because that's going to be funny to me. How did this do anyways? Night Library. I have no idea. Oh, yeah, I think he made it. Unless that's total and not per month. Still, though, apprentice tier. These aren't actually that bad. Physical copy. Ooh, that might be worth it. $50 for, how would that go? HD digital copy, don't care. Physical copy of Red Hunt, plus 6 more. Well, no. Oh, it's already done. Well, do they have anything new? For created? Ooh, what do we got here? Oh, he has a lot more. Ooh. So that was the Red Hunt, I see. 20 backers have the... Ooh, this came up September. Is it already over? I actually like the style of this one.
beg, and I
it's
hate
really cool,
to plea, but things are getting really tight and close over here. And if I can't succeed this Kickstarter, then I have to, well, I have to reassess a lot of the ways that I go forward with things.
I wonder if he has a Patreon. He probably should at this point.
After all, while this
I looked at
is
this last
fun,
week.
and
Yes,
while
rip off,
making
but my
Star
memory
Wars
is horrible.
Warhammer 40K is a lot of fun, and it's a passion project of mine. It doesn't get me anywhere. It's not something that I can ever show on a resume. It's not something that convinces creative companies or works or investors to invest in me.
That everything he just said is and is not true at the same time, because it heavily depends who you're talking to. A smaller company that wouldn't have inbuilt biases, or someone who would look at geeky pursuits as a bad thing, might actually look at this and take it as an advantage. For example, if he was trying to sell himself as a writing consultant, as someone who could have good put out, who has a demonstrated way to engage with his audience, someone in a more publishing related field, this is actually huge. With few caveats, depending on who that publisher would be. Some of them would take it as, oh, you're using other people's material, and hate it. Other people is, oh, you have a way to self-promote yourself and actively engage with it and bend over backwards for it. It depends on how they're approaching that. Then there's other companies which is like, oh, you like Star Wars and toy soldiers, and you're not 12 years old? Okay. Thank you for this interview. Do not call back. It can go either way. It really just comes down to interaction with people, how much you value that.
For that, I need other demonstrations of some kind of creative success. And this is really important in that regard. So I know that it comes off as a little pleady, and please forgive me for that. But it is quite literally a big part of my creative future on the line. But if you can find it in you, if you think, and again, the comic book is free. You can check out the comic in the description down below for free to see if you think it's worth anything.
Still don't like the
and
idea
if you
of
think
making
it
the
is
first one
worth
free.
something,
But I
consider
guess it
donating
works
even
for
a
him.
single dollar. A single dollar, especially from all of you, would take me so much farther. As per the rules of Kickstarter, if I can't reach my goal, much less my stretch goals, then all of the money is simply returned, and I'm left at square one with a rather large expenditure for having created the comic in the
Does
first
Patreon
place.
work better for him with how things are
So,
ongoing?
Please, if
I
you're
don't know.
enjoying this series, if you want to support the writer and my creative works and my creative continuation, please consider checking out the comic. Please consider donating even a single dollar to this project. It means the world to me. It's so important. If you don't have, I understand. But again, all I ask for is a small donation. There are so many fellow fans here. There are so many people who are enjoying these creative universes and the work that I produce. If you've been enjoying it for 1 hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, or more, consider providing just a little bit of backing to this project to help me continue, basically. And you've already all heard the spiel. I have aspirations to be a truly independent creative writer. I don't want to have a company or a specific power system breathing down my neck to alter
that would be the obvious
my,
idea here to keep it
my
going.
narrative
Because how often
into
he
something that
publishes.
isn't what I was going out to do. But for that, I need freedom to produce what I think is important and creative to produce. And to have that freedom, I need to be able to make some money for myself. I need to be able to be profitable in some way, or at least to get back a little bit of what I spent making the comics.
If he was going not so much the comic angle, but maybe novelizations, one of the options he could look into, explicitly not one he would because of the independent angle he mentioned, is going to a publisher, showing what you can produce, the time frame you can produce it, and then showing this channel and the engagement he can get based on people who will already be engaged and already buy his product when they go live. Because guaranteed sales are a huge pitch. A lot of the work right now in publishing isn't, is this book good? It's, will anyone buy this? Because marketing is sometimes more expensive than a book can make back in its own sales, because it's a very slim margin at this point, because everything's been cut down to the extremes. So unless you sell a book yourself, you're not going to sell a book. They're not going to help you out. It's why celebrity books are always sold, because they have an audience. They don't have to be good because people will buy it regardless. It's also why Stephanie Meyer's sold so well, because she self-promoted to an absurd level, to the point where other publishers were willing to take a chance on her because it was not a chance. fan actually does have good reason to show that I have this audience. This is the turnaround. This is how often they will support me. This is what they come back for regularly. This is how much they watch. And this is what they've done on personal funding goals when I've actually made a call to action. That kind of information like this right now in the outcome saying that it was funded, like Marius Brandon mentioned, this is actually an incredibly useful thing. But he mentioned going independent, and everything I just said, even though it would be a massive advantage to him, is also explicitly something that would not be an option then. Yeah. Kind of sucks because it would help, but also literally be the thing he doesn't want.
Because it hasn't been easy to do it all by myself. This is all self-published. If you agree with that sort of approach, if you think that's the best way for a creator like myself to go forward, please consider donating some amount to the Song and Stone project, the Kickstarter, which you can find in the description down below. Thank you for your support. And now I will return you to The Light Flickers, Part 1.
Dude. Also, Molinar, you mentioned how fast he produces channel content. That actually, depending on how they work it out, could or could not be an issue. If they have set deadlines based on it, maybe, but he can get a lot of leeway based on having a guaranteed purchaser basis or guaranteed sales because of that basis. You get a lot of leeway when they don't need to worry about making their money back. As long as you show a consistent pattern of producing, that's way more important than having a great book that you never finish when you could get people to pre-order, especially.
Please
enjoy.
enjoy.
Not safe that way, but it does work. Captain Frodo? Wait, that's actually how his name was spelled? Sorry, Fordo. Wow, I even misread that as Frodo.
The spires of Axom trembled, the towering skyscrapers becoming the stage for a desperate struggle between forces from both local and foreign galaxies. Captain Fordo charged up a flight of wide stairs and paused every couple of steps to lean over the railing and look up. On the first, second, and third times he did this, he saw nothing, but the fourth answered his inspection with a rain of cracking, cascading autocannon fire. He threw himself back as the railing was consumed by the raining shots.
Damn!
The revving of the cannon's barrels having been his only saving grace. Move up, move up! He ordered his men, signaling for them to hug the walls.
Okay, so we're back to using the AI voices. On the other hand, the AI voice did a really good job on the more radio-based troopers. The only time it really was horrible was probably when it was trying to do generic female voices.
Of them unslinging their PLX missile launchers while two others prepped and cooked smoke grenades. Fordo counted down their retaliation with his fingers, making a fist and pulling in his arm with a jerk when it was time. The grenades were tossed, but the instant they started spewing gas, two titanic forms swung down from the flight of stairs above them, their massive bodies billowing the smoke. The clone captain had only moments to see them.
Space Marines or something else? Nope, Space Marines.
Each one holding a one-handed sparking hammer while they used their other hand.
Oh shit, this is probably Space Marines in Terminator armor then. Because if it's multiple people with hammers, then either this chapter gives out some significant firepower in combat a lot more cheaply than most, or this is a bunch of the first captain's crew.
To perform the maneuver, moving like agile gundarks. We need sabers now. Fordo yelled into his comm, his voice drowned out by the expelling thunder that came from the two Space Marines, smashing the missile-wielding clones into paste. One of the three managed to get their shot off towards the upper staircase, but whether it landed a kill or not was not something that Fordo could confirm.
Wait, one? Josh Tompkins, thank you for becoming a member for 7 more months. Also, yes, Frodo, aka the Star Wars Sly Marbo. Oh my god.
Too busy sliding to the ground and out of the way of a pulverizing swing. The hammer shattered steel and plaster over the captain's head, Fordo unloading his DC-15 into the marine above him. Shots pinging and splashing against the monster's obscured purple and silver armor.
damn it!
That was the color of the
He
chapter,
cried
yeah.
out, rolling down the stairs and into several other clones as he evaded the following stomp.
Damn!
He released his DC-15 as he did, letting it fall from his grasp as he wrangled another weapon from its sling holster on the chest of another clone. The new
just told
weapon was a
weapon someone
grenade
else.
launcher. And as Fordo heard the sound of
Yes.
crunching bones and plastoid coming from the third missile-bearing clone he had summoned,
Bounce the bullet.
he fired the weapon he had commandeered into the billowing smoke before him. The launcher made a thwoomp sound as it lobbed its explosive out, catching the Marine in the chest and clearing the smoke for a brief instant as the super soldier was thrown back by the force of it.
God damn! Okay, so the person to do the best against a stormtrooper, against a Star Wars probably guy in Terminator armor wasn't Anakin, it wasn't any of the Jedi, it was a clone trooper with a grenade launcher. He didn't kill him, but he immediately had some immediate stopping power.
In that short-lived moment of clarity, the other Marine could be seen as well. Red eye
Fordo was
lenses
actually in the
shining
cartoon?
with a
Oh, wow.
malevolent light as the smoke spilled back in, surrounding its advancing body. Fordo made to fire a second shot, but the familiar sound of lightsabers activating forestalled him. 3 Jedi leapt into the smoke, bodies spinning and twirling
And how
over
many
the
bodies
heads
come
of
back
the
out?
stalled clones, sabers bright and burning. They landed and began to weave and battle with the 2 Space Marines, clearing the smoke through the use of their speed and powers. To say nothing of the shimmering exhalations released by the hammers wielded by the Marines as they endeavored to pulverize their Jedi assailants. 3 dueled 2 as the Astartes began to retreat back up the stairs, giving ground, one of them injured thanks to Fordo's quick thinking. Injured but far from felled. The Marines backed up to a certain point, the Jedi eagerly chasing them, while Fordo had 5 more PLXs brought to the front. Just as the experienced clone had expected, the Marines were only retreating to their own benefit, luring the Jedi into another crossfire, holding them locked in melee while 9 other Space Marines opened fire from across.
So, yeah, I was making an offhand joke earlier about the Jedi's jumping in and then the body pieces came out. But it sounds like that was completely accurate, and this guy's already figured out that they're in a crossfire, that it's a trap, and highlighting how a lot of the Jedi were not tactical geniuses. We've seen some of their good tacticians. They are not here right now.
Across the staircase above them. Their barking, exploding bolter rounds began to fall with distinct accuracy among the Jedi, wounding and then killing one, while the other 2 cartwheeled back, narrowly avoiding the roaring death of both thunderous hammers and detonating steel. And when they did, Fordo was ready.
Fire!
He yelled, grenades and missiles being lobbed up towards the 2 melee-oriented Astartes, while a second group with only missile launchers leaned out from the railings and fired into the cluster of Space Marines which had been using their bolters from above.
Oh.
The 2 Space Marines before them seemed to have expected the action, both leaping into the wall, slamming their hammers
Into the
into
wall?
it and breaking through
Oh,
the metal
through
and
the
into
wall.
the adjacent floor.
Yeah.
The other Space Marines were less prepared, but pulled back nonetheless, and again, Fordo was unable to confirm how many had died from the counterattack.
Probably none.
The Jedi's remains were recovered, at least as much as they could be, before the clone captain directed a hefty portion of his forces to pursue the 2 Marines, while the rest continued up. The last thing he wanted was for the enemy to be running rampant while behind them or in their flanks. Somewhere to the rear of their forces was Jedi Master Oppo Rancisis, organizing their continuing strategy and lending his power to all of the clones and Jedi through the
So those Jedi running in were running in with one of the actual good strategists backing them. That's actually disappointing.
use of battle meditation. Fordo could feel it even then, a subtle but powerful extra sense falling over him, making his reflexes faster, his hunches more accurate, his predictions nearly prophetic. And even with all of that, they were only making ground through bad attrition. As the clone forces had engaged the Space Marines, General Rancisis had insisted on breaking their larger force into 5 separately led assault formations.
Why?
Together, working
So they're not
in
all in one
perfect
place to
sync,
die.
the Republic had punched through in various places and had begun to force the Marines back.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, because if they're all clumped up in one location, then the Space Marine overwhelming firepower and just brutality and toughness is just a straight up fight for them. But the clones are way more adaptable, and if they can all act together as a coherent unit because of battle meditation, that does take advantage of their really only advantage at this point. That does make a lot more sense then. The 3 Jedi jumping in still sounds stupid, though.
It was both easier and harder than Fordo had imagined it would be. On the one hand, the Space Marines had not suffered any confirmed kills, though several had been observed to be wounded. This was not because of how invincible they were, but rather how readily they retreated in the face of combat. It seemed almost cowardly to the clone captain.
If you see a retreating Space Marine, it means they're not actually retreating.
The Astartes seemed...
Well, I mean, joking aside, it does happen, but the entire leading them into a crossfire earlier is probably leading them into a kill zone they've set up somewhere else.
...seemingly unwilling to place themselves into prolonged danger with the advancing Republic, abandoning their defensive positions within seconds of them being contested.
Pulling you into a worse situation.
The advance had been easy, with the captain spotting several holdout locations which, upon even brief inspection, revealed themselves to be advantageous kill zones for the Astartes. If they had chosen to hold their ground in these places, they would have killed many.
Yeah, because what they don't know is that the virus bomb may or may not be active. So they're actively falling back and not actually trying to win. They're trying to stall. That would do it, yeah.
Clones and Jedi, almost certainly forcing the attacking assault formations to seek another way around them rather than fight through them. Fordo expected that they were being lured into some kind of trap or ambush, and thus continued to check for them, advancing at pace, but with caution. Yet, thus far, the ambushes they had been pitted against had proven to be brief affairs, reaping losses on the Republic to be sure, but nowhere near the amount that would be needed to bleed them dry from attrition.
Just slowing you
Slowly
down.
but surely, the Astartes were allowing themselves to be cornered at the top of the tower. And yet, on the other hand, the very steel of the spires they fought within was shaken every few moments.
Damn.
PLX missile launchers bellowed within the deep confines of the city construct, bolters barking back in response as every inch of contested ground was steadily drenched in crimson blood. While it would not be enough to stop them, the Space Marines, despite their continuous withdrawal, were killing clones all the way up the tall spire.
Okay, this might be a weird question, but what setting is this art from? Because it almost looks like Star Wars, except this style and the prow don't quite match a lot of the ships I do know. So I'm not really sure where fan got this from, unless it's yeah, it's probably generic AI versions of art.
Fordo had never faced warriors like these, soldiers of this caliber, and it helped nothing that their armor and weapons were so absurdly powerful. Anything less than 12 blasters on one target was simply not enough to be considered an even subpar offensive measure. And that
More
was
rocket
only
launchers?
when considering the average Space Marine, something Fordo already knew was not the only possible kind. And yet, in open spite of their losses, the roaring clones under his command were steadily gaining ground, shoving the Astartes back, floor by gore-slicked floor. The purple and silver-clad Space Marines unleashed their devastating weaponry with unyielding precision and brutality, their many guns howling, death echoing through the cavernous halls they were retreating up. Standing tall over their adversaries, the Space Marines Fordo had been facing seemed to possess physical strength and speed that was nigh unmatched by any save the best of the Jedi who dared to confront them. To Fordo's growing rage, every Space Marine they wounded appeared to come at the cost of 10 clones. The white Phase 2 armors of their advancing Republic.
Sorry, it just occurred to me. He's talking about for every Space Marine wounded was 10 clones. And then the previous video we had Thrawn talking about how it's equal to 1 to 10. And it's literally the numbers he was talking about here are what's being quoted now. So, yeah, it just kind of amuses me that we watch those videos back to back, referencing the exact same information.
Public forces too often stained with the sacrifice of their comrades. Yet even so, the clones fought on, their sheer numbers overwhelming the more stubborn holdouts which the tempered hands occasionally attempted. Fordo came across one such rare situation now, as he came to a place where the Space Marines had destroyed the entire staircase for several feet going up.
he talks about stubborn holdouts, but it doesn't sound like that because what we know on the outside is a stubborn holdout for a Space Marine is not the equivalent of just destroying the stairs. It does seem like they're not even, I guess for a Space Marine standard, this is not so much a orderly retreat as a very lazy retreat. They're not making a point to hold out. They're not defending the territory. They're barely even making, they're just basically walking back lazily as far as a Space Marine would work. I wonder if anyone's going to actually bring it up later that they probably could have won this.
At the rim of the other side of the severed staircase was a rough barricade of metal made from the very staircase they had destroyed, and, standing behind it, a Space Marine with an enormous slug-throwing gun linked directly into a bulky, ammunition-bearing backpack.
Onto this floor,
Heavies,
now.
yeah.
Fordo yelled, ducking into the door which led off into the current floor he was on. The clone smashed through it with a lunge, saving himself and several others near him as the Space Marine rained death into the front line of his assault force. The horrible sound of his heavy weapon churning clone troopers into mulch filled the air painfully. But Fordo did not let it distract him, did not stop moving, even for a second. Still bearing his stolen grenade launcher, he popped a high explosive round into the chamber and aimed it into the ceiling above him. Another thwoomp sounded shortly before a massive explosion blew a hole.
1 second. Sorry about that. Hate sneezing on camera. And I have little cat hair just floating around.
Into the floor above. Fordo slung the launcher and checked his special issue gauntlets. The liquid cable dispenser that facilitated his cord whip and grappling line was still intact and functional on his left arm.
Is he going
And
around?
on his right, the deployable knuckle-mounted vibro blade extended and retracted smoothly. The clone captain aimed his gauntlet up at the hole, firing his cable and rappelling up past it in a matter of seconds.
Is he literally doing what I think he's doing? Yeah, I see why people said this guy was Sly Marlboro of the Star Wars side. He's like, he has a bigger gun. Let's go for melee.
He activated his helmet light, finding himself in a dark series of offices which ran beside the stairs. Checking a holodisc briefly for a map of the place, he took off running, able to orient himself easily thanks to the loud, continuous roar of fire that the Space Marine was letting loose with. Fordo turned a corner and kicked open a door, finding both what he desired and what he had desired to avoid at the same exact time. Across the wide room from Fordo was the open door which led out into the staircase above the murderous Marine. For his counterattack to work, he would need to reach it, to blindside the Astartes who was killing his men. However, before the stairway entrance stood a pair of Space Marines, both also holding massively enormous guns.
So he succeeded in getting around the one Space Marine to find out that there's two more he has to kill in advance. Yeah. If it wasn't for everyone talking about how awesome this guy is, I would assume this is going to end with him dying horribly.
One which glowed a radioactive blue, and the other which had a lensed barrel that was thicker than Fordo's arm.
Laser cannon, probably.
Both looked up at him briefly.
Probably a grav cannon.
Pause passing between the three soldiers before the Astartes raised and angled their weapons up to blast him. He ran straight for the two, counting to 3 in his head, before dropping down into a slide.
Taking out the Devastators.
The Space Marines fired in coordination, one issuing forth a gout of glowing blue plasma, which arched over Fordo, the nearness of its passing, darkening his armor as it drank in the heat. The other fired a thick beam of light, which atomized the air above Fordo's head.
Nope, maybe it was a las cannon.
Molten hole where he had been moments earlier. The captain rolled back up to his feet, blade extending from his clenched fist.
Salamander, I need you and your squad all missiled up at the front, now!
He ordered into his helmet as he ran.
That's suicide.
The clone on the other end of the comm began to protest as Captain Fordo came up on the two Space Marines. They were encumbered by the size of their huge weapons, and they did not seem to have the time to fire them off once more, so they took positions to swing the weapons like clubs. Any such strike more than enough to crush a man flat.
God damn! So he's literally a mortal running at Space Marines with a knife. And it sounds like he's going to succeed.
Fordo weaved as he approached, angling towards one of the two Marines, before breaking off at the last moment, again dropping to skid, nearly losing an arm as one Marine swung high and missed him, while the other slammed its weapon low, hardened barrel of the gun denting the metal ground an inch from Captain Fordo's left arm.
Wait, did he say he lost an arm? Or did he almost lost an arm?
And missed him, while the Marines, before breaking off at the last moment, again dropping to skid, nearly lose.
Nearly, okay, I missed the nearly.
Fordo arm.
Do it now, Mander. That is an order. Await my command to fire.
Fordo roared into his helmet, speeding past the two Marines, knowing their eyes and weapons were not far behind him.
Because they're tracking him
He
still.
did not have far to go,
But he's
reaching
running
out
past.
to catch the side of the doorway with his left arm as Fordo ran into the stairway, swinging himself downward to the left. And there was the Marine, already halting his fire, already informed by his comrades in the other room that a clone was coming up on him from behind. Had he been a normal Space Marine, Fordo would not have stood a chance. But the
this one's
Astartes, which
heavily
had been
encumbered.
devastating his troopers, was not armed like the
Really, fan? Because Fordo would not know what this kind of trooper is, or this kind of Imperium unit designation is, that it's a devastation trooper, or devastator. You're just going flat out, oh, they're devastating us. What kind of horrible space marine? We'll call them devastation marines. It's not even a pun, but it's like pun adjacent on this one. God,
the standard Marine. Heavy weapon in hand, massive ammunition backpack burdening him, the Marine was slower than the others, and the captain, for all his lack of augmentations, was bred from the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. And even more than his
Jar Jar
brothers,
Binks?
Fordo was fast, and Fordo was lethal. He ran, his feet clanging on the steel floor, and leapt, reeling his right arm back. The Space Marine finished his turn, began to fire, raising the line of his weapons aimed to try to catch the airborne clone.
But
the Marine had aimed to compensate for Fordo running down the stairs, not jumping from the top of them, and even as he corrected his aim, bolts firing one after the other from his massive gun, he knew it was too late. Fordo felt time freezing as the Marine's bulky upper body sped towards him. His fist and protruding, humming vibroblade reeled back. The clone had only one shot, one chance, and he knew it. So he took it. The captain led his landing with his fist, punching into the eye lens of the Space Marine and driving the fist-mounted blade in as deeply as it would go.
you know, people keep saying this is Sly Marbo. I disagree. We have gone full-on Assassin's Creed on this thing. Like, not just, you know, some of the later ones. We're talking like Ezio, or I forgot the initial assassin's name, but dear God, we're doing full-on breaking in and swan diving in for a fist assassination with a wrist-mounted blade levels of what the hell, man?
The hungering weapon buzzed as it chewed into the vulnerable armoring, sliding through Auspex sensors and ceramite, turning metal and more into powder.
God damn!
If Fordo had merely punched the Marine in the face, this would have been as far as his cut would have taken him. But with the added force of his weight and momentum from his jump,
knock him off
the
balance.
blade burst the inner layering and drove directly into the Marine's face.
Oh, Terror, yeah, that's one Hobbit.
He sliced
March
through the Astartes' eye, the vibroblade buzzing as it met the Marine's hardened skull, and though it did not penetrate far into that,
it did
it still
penetrate.
proved lethal. The high-frequency vibrations of the blade, now anchored into the unyielding skull of the super soldier, performed a deadly sonic lobotomy, turning gray matter into pulp as the blade normally did with flesh.
So this means out of all the people on the Star Wars side who have achieved a kill of a Space Marine, it is Anakin Skywalker, Count Dooku, Grievous, the real Grievous, and a clone ARC Trooper. That's 4 of them, man. I'm not counting the ship-based ones that just happened to get blown up when the ships went down. Like, this is in-person combat. God damn!
Blood spurted from the Astartes' remaining eye and nose. His last thoughts literally obliterated as he began to slump and fall. But even as the Marine died, the other two were making ready to avenge him, coming out onto the staircase and aiming their weapons.
This is why he had all the lasses.
The door onto the floor above me. Fire now!
Fordo ordered as he began to yank
because he knew they were
his
there,
fist
so he could
free
tell them
of
to
the
fire
now
at it.
Dead Space Marine.
Aye!
Salamander yelled from below, his whole squad raising their weapons and letting loose with a volley of missile fire. Rumbling curses in their own language, the Marines withdrew hastily, narrowly avoiding the cascade of explosions and pulling back as the others of their kind had done. Lines were fired and set up, the clones scaling up the hole the captain had created and across the gap in short order. Fordo sat down as his forces began to move across the barrier, taking a moment to remove his helmet, drinking water from a canteen before...
God damn. Yeah, this is one of those clones when they actually are freaking awesome, are really freaking awesome. To quote Ripoff Productions. And thus Frodo, I know it's Fordo, I'm not going to correct myself, only killed a space marine, or not only killed a space marine, but also made the Temperhand's first captain his words, there will be no losses. Unless he meant in the same way, there are no dead custodies. Ever. Yeah, let's go with that one. Yeah, Doom Guy intensifies.
Or dumping some of it over his head. His heart still hammered, and his thoughts were still troubled. What were the Space Marines playing at? Why not just stop and confront them in proper force? It felt like they were being lured, but could he be sure of that? So
Functionally, yes,
consumed
but...
was he by these thoughts that Captain Fordo did not realize the stares he was getting until he ended his brief break and stood back up, raising his helmet to place it back on and pausing. All around him, helmed faces were turned his way, and in a much more transfixed manner than he was used to, even when filling a command role. He scowled and lowered his helmet over his...
Because he just did with a knife what no one else could do with multiple guns.
features.
And also because if it was 1 to 10, he just took on 3 and survived.
What's the matter? Something wrong with my face, troopers?
He snapped at them. In response, they slowly parted, making room between him and the fallen Space Marine.
Captain, you killed it.
Said a nearby clone.
Yeah.
There was a brief pause then as Fordo loosely nodded his head.
Yeah, I plan to be doing a lot more of that before this is done.
He said,
should too.
cocking open the grenade launcher he still bore and sliding in an armor-piercing round.
How about you, troopers? You gonna stand around gawking at a dead imp? Or are you gonna do your jobs and help me finish this?
He challenged back, and his clones roared in response.
How long before we get Saint Frodo? At this point, I'm kind of assuming it'll eventually just get in there by cross-pollination of the worship for Gax and Lazarus. Oh, speaking of Lazarus.
He sighed heavily and rubbed at his eyes, feeling them ache almost as much as the numbed, burn-patch-covered side of his scorched face. The new saint felt old, sitting wearily in the dimly lit office, his gaze fixed on the towering stacks of paperwork that detailed the fate of far over a mere 600 valiant souls. The weight of their lives.
Yeah, fans, sometimes when you do AI art, you get things like this. The more you look at it, the worse it gets.
Pressed heavily upon him as his prosthetic arm traced lines on the evacuation roster, determining who would be saved from the impending doom of the virus bomb or the merciless onslaught of the Republic. The room was filled with an air of solemnity, broken only by the sound of a sharp knock that cut through the heavy silence. Jumping a little in shock and wondering if it was one of the guards who stood outside the doors, Lazarus cracked his neck, secretly happy to entertain any minor distraction if it offered him a reprieve.
Wait. there's two things going on right now that might come into play, but I'm not sure if they do or not, and that bugs me. It's reducing the forces on the Imperium side, getting rid of most of their forces, and only leaving the most dedicated behind. But also those who are at least replaceable. So I'm assuming, I guess maybe the next canoness at this point is not going to be with them. Because losing her too would be way too big of a loss, unless Fan wants to go that way. I don't know. Obi-Wan is out of commission right now. Mace Windu is functionally removed from the field. The only real Jedi that could put an immediate presence here would either be Rancis, but he's busy with the retreating side, or maybe Ahsoka, because she already had the play where she sent someone with the documents to them. Would that work? With an Imperial force cut off and expecting to die, but also not needing to die to survive. The way I'm wondering about this is because, is this a way to preserve these forces and maybe have that middle ground faction of fuck Palpatine when he eventually does pull some bullshit after this? I don't know.
His current duty. Enter, he called, his voice carrying a
Are we about to see all the characters
that he
die?
could scarcely mask.
Or is there a way
Commissar
through this?
Jane Lee Ross marched inside, her rigid demeanor and stiff uniform matching the no-nonsense tone of her voice. The red and black garbed commissar saluted the saint with crisp precision as she began to speak. Holiness, I hope I am not disturbing you. Lazarus shook his head and beckoned her further in, gesturing towards one of the chairs seated before the ornate wooden desk he now occupied. Jane strode 3 steps closer, but did not sit, instead continuing to speak. I have an odd matter to discuss with you. If there had been too many instances of this, I would never think to bring it to your attention. But there is just one, so I decided to bring this instance to you personally. Lazarus raised an eyebrow at that,
Like, what?
setting down his autoquill. Instance of what? Lazarus asked. Jane seemed to stumble a little there, as if trying to find the right words to answer with before resuming, her voice stuttering somewhat as she began.
Considering whose skull she's holding, I'm wondering if the incident is one saint to another they need to speak.
That there is a soldier demanding to speak with you. He
Or
wants
not.
you to change his assignment within the evacuation roster.
What?
At this, the saint sighed and nodded, raising his quill again. Many more than they needed had volunteered, so he was barely shocked by this occurrence. Right. A few of them were bound to lose their nerve. I'm surprised you didn't handle this yourself.
I think I know who this is. Is this... Did we get freaking Farnus back?
But given that you have brought this to me personally, I suppose it means nothing to reassign him to a ship heading out. What is his name? Lazarus asked.
Say it, you
but Jane
bastard fan.
shook her head at him. It's not that, Holiness. This man, he refuses to accept his evacuation assignment and is insisting on a chance to convince you to change your decision, to assign him into the 600, not out of them.
The
She
601st.
explained. Well, that is rather unexpected.
Did Fan really just make Vader's army +1? Yeah, he did.
What is his name, his assignment and position? Lazarus asked,
Say it.
putting the quill
Say
back
it,
down
Fan.
and making ready to sort through the rosters before him. His name is Farnus Elite.
Call it!
He is assigned to the 174th Fastilian Imperial Irregulars, Munitorum designation 21411. She reported, Lazarus quickly sorting through as she spoke the information. Ah, here he is. He's a kid. 19 solar cycles. Let's see. He's in the infantry. Squad is almost entirely KIA. 2 of his group made it back to the Basilica, received treatment for their injuries. Shit. Lost one of them on the walls when the Republic began its Voidcraft bombardment. He's one of 2 left, Lazarus said as he read through the information before him. He looked up, brow askew. Why, in Terra's name, does he want to stay down here? He asked.
He has the message
commissar.
still, or did he lose it?
I am not completely sure, Holiness. I can try to explain it to you, but like I said, he is insisting, even to the point of risking his life, that he be allowed to speak with you. I can send him away if you prefer.
And that's why he wants to speak to them. He has the the paper, the actual paper with terms on it.
Deal with this judgment myself, Jane offered, but the saint shook his head. With another sigh, Lazarus waved his hand and relented.
Also, the idea that the commissar would have enough restraint not to kill someone for making demands of them. Wow. That's actually unique on its own right.
No, it's fine. Send him in. The former major sighed, suppressing a yawn as he did. After what he estimated to be at least 14 hours of combat, the sun on this dreadful planet was finally setting.
Come on,
the dying
Farnes.
light shaded by a distant, yet approaching storm. The stims helped to keep the saint aware, but even with them cycling in his blood, he doubted he'd be able to keep this up if night fell and the sound of falling rain permeated the air. He could only hope that the bomb, or the replique, would kill him before he fell unconscious. The door swung open, and Farnes Elitan stepped into the room, his nervousness palpable as he introduced himself. I am Farnes.
He wouldn't know about the saint
he
either.
began to say.
No,
yes,
he would.
Yes,
He would
I know who you are.
He would know because they had made it back at that point. He was with her as she charged, and they had been at least aware.
Lazarus said, cutting him off, skimming over his file briefly. The saint looked up at him, affecting a dubious expression. Vastellan, you hail from the 174th, correct? He asked, probing. Yes, sir, Farnes said, snapping a salute and nodding. Take a seat, Private Elitan, Lazarus ordered, gesturing towards a chair. He turned towards Commissar Leros as Farnes began to sit. You may leave us, Commissar. Close the door behind you. He dismissed with a nod of his
Dismissing the
head
Commissar.
in her direction. Jane seemed to be about to protest, but bit her tongue and nodded, her
guess Saint
expression
does
softening
outreact.
slightly as she obeyed the saint's command. As
on,
you wish,
Farnes.
Holiness, she said as she exited the room.
My first thought is that if he said anything about I carry a message or something like that, the commissar would kill him flat out for consorting with the enemy. I mean, for all I know, Lazarus still might, but...
Leaving Lazarus and Farnes alone in Ishtara's former office. Lazarus leaned forward, his tired eyes reviving, fixing the younger man with a piercing gaze. Why are you refusing the evacuation order, guardsman? He asked bluntly, making Farnes blush somewhat and shake his head. Oh, no, sir. Holiness, it's not my intention to refuse any orders, sir. I just think I would be of more help to the Imperium here than up there. The soldier tried to explain. More help here? Do you not fear the virus bomb or the encroaching Republic? Both will kill you, likely kill us all.
Nope.
Before the sun has another chance to rise.
Depending on who they deal with. At this point, Palpatine, definitely. Obi-Wan is out. Windu is probably in a worse place than Palpatine at the moment because he's completely unrestrained, where Palpatine would have fun with it, which is probably worse in the long run, but not in the short run. Ahsoka probably is the safe chance here, and any other one who I could think about is just not in engagement range at all right now.
Farnes took a deep breath
And
as
Rancis
the saint
would probably
spoke,
honor anything they
and
try.
when he responded, his voice was laced with an unwavering reverence. I have heard the rumors, sir, about Ishtara and the Commissar and the bomb. And if Canoness Ordain herself assured us of safety, then I'd believe it, sir, he said, and Lazarus was almost
Faithful man
struck
indeed.
by the earnestness he saw there. In fact, he would have been struck had this conversation not been about trapping this young man to die here and not to carry out his faith into a longer future.
on.
And the Republic? Lazarus pressed, making Farnes pale somewhat and swallow hard before responding. As for the Republic, I won't lie. I am afraid. But I believe there is still hope. Skepticism burned in Lazarus's eyes, and though he did not want to quash the boy's faith,
Come on,
he did not shy
Farnes.
from challenging it. Explain, guardsman. Why do you believe the situation is not hopeless? Asked the saint, crossing his arms on top of the desk and leaning in a bit. Varnus hesitated for a moment, his hand delving into his pocket to retrieve a small, blood-stained prayer scroll. Lazarus eyed it, lifting an eyebrow and looking back up at the soldier for an explanation. Sir, my comrade, Tech Priest Nerva Sharp, she and I fought side by side within an Imperial Knight. We helped turn back the enemy from the Basilica gates, fought alongside Ishtara Ordain herself. It was Nerva who saved the Canoness when we were all crushed beneath a fallen starship. I know it's hard to believe, but I am speaking only the truth, Varnus exclaimed, eyes wide, fully expecting to be disbelieved.
Here's the thing. I'm not saying come on because of Varnus saying it. I'm saying come on because I don't want Fan to cut it right here. There's only a little left, and he is the kind of person who will do that. It's like, here's what you need to see, and then cut it. I want to see this come out. Do not drag this out, Fan. Let this freaking thing be delivered.
I believe you, the saint said quickly and easily. Many eyes saw what you describe. So for now, at least, let's say I believe you.
Yeah.
But what about that makes you think we can defeat the Republic with 600 men alone?
Maybe not defeat.
Lazarus asked. Well, we were left for dead after the crash. But Nerva and I were found and saved by a Jedi Knight of the Republic. An abhuman woman who called herself Ahsoka Tano.
He actually used the word abhuman, not alien. Yeah. Fully proving that everything Ahsoka said actually worked. Because it was just a matter of, we might have a way to deceive them, he would still say alien, but he's actually going for it. You know, if this was anyone else, I'd be sighing something about, oh my god, what the fuck is up with this cliffhanger right now? Except for Fan, this is as much to a clean ending as he will ever get. That's not even a joke at this point. We all know for a fact when he decides to go full-on cliffhanger, it would be, well, sir, I need to talk to you. And that's where they would end. But here, he's actually going in. He gets in there. He specifically uses the term abhuman to describe someone, meaning that he believes what's going on. He's going to act in good faith. He's not going to try and rip them around. I guess it just comes down to Lazarus listening or not. Or does he need to be convinced of it? Which is admittedly what I think will probably happen, having to get some kind of convincing. So as far as Fan cliffhangers go, this is one of the least cliffhanger he's ever done. In fact, I'm pretty sure the amount of actually giving information before ending the episode probably hurt him a bit, which is why he made it a part 1 and not the entire chapter 44. Does it sound like I'm trying to cope with the amount of cliffhanger right now? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But also I stand by the point that for a fan with too much time in terms of cliffhanger, this is one of the least aggressive I've ever made. If only because the list is so high on the other side. Either way. Next week, we're going to do another one. I don't think there's many episodes left. And actually, how many are... Oh, shit. There are literally only 3 episodes left. One of them is 2.5 hours long, though, so that's good. It's going to really suck catching up. Fan needs a Patreon so people can throw money at him. Either way. For everyone watching, thanks. I'm not going to speed this up any more than I was actually thinking about doing it next week. Then I realized, yeah, then I'm out. That would really not be something I want to do because I like this man. The only thing I can hope of is that Fan made a point about releasing a bunch of extra episodes. So maybe they'll all be out within the next 3 days. It'll be like 20 episodes more. I know it's not going to happen, but I can pretend. I could be wrong intentionally. Thank you very much. I'll stick to that. Either way, if you guys haven't, links below to the original video. Fan did a great job. Hit him up. Go to his Patreon, or if he doesn't have a Patreon, find out and bug him into getting one. And go on his Kickstarter because he has all the other stuff up there. I need to get around to that as soon as I remember how to log into Kickstarter. I reset the password because I forgot it, then I forgot the password I reset it as, so I really need to work on that. Also, it wasn't made with my normal Gmail address, so it had to be somewhere else. But I don't remember if it was Proton Mail or iCloud for some reason. I need to get into that. Whatever. all the same, I'll see you guys in the next one. Hit up Fan. He did an awesome job. And God, I have a feeling next week is going to go one of two ways. Either we jump right into what's happening, or Fan is going to pull a Fan and do something completely different out of the blue, unrelated to this. And it could go either way because it's Fan. He might very well do both, or start with one and then jump over to a continuation of this immediately. I don't know. And I'll probably like it regardless. So it'll be awesome. Yeah. It's why I'm really looking forward to seeing more, but also hating the fact that the more I see, the less there is. Yeah. The problem with reading, you catch up. Either way, I'll see you guys then. Adios.